Good evening, Saitlanders. How are you? We trust that you are very well. I'd like to talk to you about a very serious thing that too few people are discussing. Today, I went to see my friends Henny and Vonda in Orania. Many of you will know them. They owned and then they leased out, and now they've repossessed the Skildershoek shop on the corner. Everybody knows it. And we were chatting about some serious things. I was looking for somebody. I thought they could perhaps point me in the right direction. We chatted for a short while, and the subject of the Khmelnitsky explosion came up. And Vonda was a bit taken aback. You know, she wasn't fully familiar with the importance of it. So driving back from Orania, I contemplated this thing that people haven't heard enough about, one of the most serious matters of the history of mankind. On the night of the 13th of May, 2 Saturdays ago, today being Friday, the 26th of May, the Russians struck a stockpile of ammunition in western Ukraine with their missiles. Apparently the Khmelnitsky missiles, but nobody's absolutely certain. Well, I suppose some people are. And they blew up this stockpile that was composed largely of depleted uranium rounds for British Challenger 2 tanks that are being donated to Ukraine. So the British said, all right, we're going to send you a whole bunch of tanks and you'll need the ammo for them, won't you? Well, here's the ammo. And they sent many, we don't know for sure, but probably hundreds of thousands of tank rounds. The Russians warned some months back that if that should happen, they would not allow depleted uranium to be employed on Russian soldiers. They would, one way or the other, put a stop to it. The stockpile was held in or near the town of Khmelnitsky. When it was blown up on the night of Saturday the 13th of May, it caused an explosion that was so great that it resembled an atomic bomb explosion. Those of you who've seen the videos and the photographs will be the first to support my extraordinary claim, because you will remember how tiny the skyscrapers in the foreground, in other words, they were relatively bigger than they should be, if that's the right way of saying it, how tiny they were by comparison with the mushroom cloud in the far background. It was phenomenal. Now, why is it so significant? By the way, there was another town struck the same night, and there has been a suggestion that the material that was struck in that town in Ukraine may also have been depleted uranium rounds. Why it's so significant and why I'm making this video about it is because depleted uranium is very, very toxic. Depleted uranium is uranium whose fissile isotope has been reduced. So they mine uranium and it has a naturally occurring property of being fissile. Fissile is the opposite of fusile. To fuse, to come together. To fission is to break apart. So uranium in nature possesses this property that as a part of it, just a small part, 0.72%, so 0.7% of naturally occurring uranium is fissile. It wants to fission out. It wants to radiate. Okay, like radiation. When it's depleted through processes, engineering, scientific processes, it only possesses 0.3%, not 0.7% of this fissile characteristic. And it's used in tank rounds and many other cannons and machine guns, because being so extremely heavy, it has a great deal of momentum. So when you throw a ball made of uranium and you catch it, it's... Whereas if I threw a ball to one of my boys that was made of foam, as a little 2-year-old, teaching him to catch, it was harmless. If he caught it, it couldn't hurt his hands, it wouldn't cause him to fall backwards. So there are two extremes. Its incredible mass, its density, is such that when it strikes something, the momentum allows it to penetrate or perforate that thing, depending, of course, on what material is used and how thick it is and so on. But relatively speaking, it penetrates or perforates, it damages armored vehicles and structures, buildings, and so on, with greater effectiveness than lead or brass or whatever. Okay, so that's its military purpose. The British donated, the Ukrainians have, the Russians strike. We know from US use of depleted uranium in 91 and 2003 invasions, 93 and 2001 of Iraq, that people fell ill. We also know from NATO use of it in Kosovo against the Serbs that people fell ill. That's in the Yugoslav breakup in the 1990s. Remember, towards the end, NATO intervened against the Serbs. We know that it not only seemed to cause a great deal of illness among the people in the region, in Kosovo, in southern Iraq, but also the people using it, those soldiers and airmen who were exposed to it by virtue of it being employed in their cannons, tanks, big aircraft cannons, you've seen the videos. Those people began to fall ill at an uncommon rate of uncommon illnesses. So much so that the top World Health Organization doctor in southern Iraq said that his calculations, the rate of illness sustained by the people in the region subsequent to the employment of depleted uranium in Iraq, southern Iraq, was 48%. And that trend, he believed, would continue, that it wouldn't drop off anytime soon. Now, there is some confusion about radiation sickness and what depleted uranium really does. It's not atomic, as you think of the illnesses sustained by the Japanese when the United States of America dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or the illnesses sustained in movies, for instance, by the crews of submarines whose nuclear reactors had failed. It's more like a poison than the atomic radiation properties of a uranium bomb. I beg your pardon. The long and the short of it is that the people in that vicinity, in the vicinity of those one, possibly two explosions featuring depleted uranium after they were struck by missiles, Russian missiles, in western Ukraine on the night of Saturday the 13th of May, is that the people in those regions, I don't know how far it extends, I've not seen anything to give a reliable idea. And of course, it would depend upon wind direction and other factors. So whether the radius from the explosions to, how far people will fall ill and how severely ill, and maybe if you're 50 miles away, well, you only get a little headache. If you're 1 mile away, well, I have no idea. But what we can say safely is that wherever the wind blew that stuff, according to its lethal properties, many, many, many people are going to suffer grievous illnesses. One of the illnesses that this doctor spoke about, and as I understood the language, it was a little bit bewildering. I was a bit perplexed afterwards. But actually, it's actually, in the simplest English language terms, he was really saying that the percentage of illness being 48% referred, strictly speaking, to neuroblastomas alone. And what's more, if I take his language, if I assume that the words he used were correct and he was not speaking poorly, then strictly speaking, aside from all of the other illnesses, the 48% rate referred to children. So never mind anything, there's a lot of other illnesses, many. That's why I said to you, the crews of those tanks and of those infantry fighting vehicles and of those armored fighting vehicles and of those planes that used rounds of depleted uranium have fallen ill. One, very, very famous, you can look this up, infantry fighting vehicle, Bradley fighting vehicle, nicknamed Carnivore, its crew all fell ill, very, very ill. and I think some of them died. Anyway, the point is that if this guy is speaking correctly, then just besides all of the other illnesses in the adults, in the moms and the dads, in the fighting age people, the children alone had 48% of them had developed neuroblastoma, and that would continue. He did not see signs of it abating yet. So perhaps we can say that 48% of the children in Western Ukraine, perhaps also Romania, perhaps also in Moldova, perhaps also in southern Belarus, perhaps also in southern Poland, we don't know for sure, will develop neuroblastoma. Now, what neuroblastoma is I speak as a layman, so please be patient with me. On your kidneys, you have adrenal glands, adrenal glands, right, sit on top of the kidneys. And neuroblastomas come from there. It's when the certain cells, immature cells, I don't know what's an immature cell. Can it be immature? Until what age? I have no idea. Do we all have immature cells? I couldn't tell you. But cells in the adrenal glands become cancerous, and then it can be spread to other areas of the body. Lungs, you name it, but it's too terrible for words. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a big thing. I don't think that it was grand that the USA used Agent Orange on Vietnamese. I don't think that it was okay that the USA or whomsoever else might have, NATO, used depleted uranium in Iraq, perhaps also in Syria and elsewhere. So I'm not suggesting to you that it's okay when it happens to brown and yellow people. But I am saying that there is now, in the Europe of our forefathers, in the flower of the world, enormous, widespread depleted uranium poisoning occurring. And that it may in fact become far worse than anywhere else that it's ever been used, because it was blown up. It's not like I, as a tank commander, got the gunner to fire one shell at one house, and it exploded, and we fired another 10,000 shells, and so there's some kind of saturation of this pocket where the fighting occurred. No. This was blown up into the air and may have spread, no pockets, it may have saturated everything over a phenomenally large area in Europe. For decades to come, our people's children, baptized Christian babies, are going to suffer grievously at the hands, as it were, of those British munitions. You can't blame the Russians for striking that thing, because the option was that it was going to happen in their territory. that those munitions would be brought and employed against them. And they warned in advance. They said, listen, there's a red line here. If you bring that stuff, we are going to ensure that it is not used against us. Let's fight. You can bring your helicopters, ray guns, laser beams, whatever, drones, bullets. Not that evil. You simply cannot lay it at the door of the Russians. In this case. Other things, I'm sure they're wrong. But in this case, you cannot blame them. History will remember that the British knowingly gave weapons, munitions, that do, as a matter of fact, cause illness in old and young, man and woman alike, but most notably, if that guy's simple English was correct and he wasn't making an error, a slip in his grammar. Most notably, rates of 48% of neuroblastoma alone, aside from all of the other illnesses that the children get, and aside from the illnesses that the adults get, 48% grievous cancer saturation of children. It is a huge thing, ladies and gentlemen. Please remember it. We are being dragged to hell by a group of puppet masters who believe that in numerological terms they must destroy the world before the year 2026 is out. I forget the precise date. Thank you for watching this video.